Before we pressed the record button, we were talking about what's going on in Laos. And so why don't you just start from there? Tell us about this human rights lawyer, what you can tell us what's going on.
Yeah, this human rights lawyer, his name is Lu Siwei.
Lu Siwei.
Yeah,
Okay.
Siwei, Siwei.
Okay.
Last name is Lu, Lu.
Okay.
Yeah, he is a very well-known Chinese human rights lawyer and defending actually many other fellow persecuted, imprisoned human rights lawyers.
Right. So he's defending other lawyers.
And also the victims of the Tiananmen Square massacre, family members. And the latest move, he was in trouble because he was one of the lawyers for one of the 12 Hong Kong protesters who tried to escape from Hong Kong to Taiwan. A couple of years ago, during the Hong Kong,
right,
protests,
when they were clamping down and they were arresting people in Hong Kong, right?
So these 12 were all brought back to China after they were intercepted, and so Lawyer Lu was one of the lawyers for those protesters, and for that he was disbarred, and then he was put on the exit ban. And
exit ban means you can't leave the country.
That's right. Okay. He was basically under
house arrest.
Right. Very tight surveillance at his home and followed everywhere. And so his wife and their 2 children basically escaped from China in January 2022, and they are residing in Los Angeles since then. And so Lawyer Lu got an invitation from the State Department as part of a State Department fellowship program and got a visa, but he was banned from boarding the flight. So that's how he was aware he was put on the exit ban.
Right.
And so about 2 weeks ago, he was basically, since he has a legitimate visa, and he decided to make another try from the China-Laos border.
Yeah.
So he did manage get out, and he, by the way, he has a legitimate law visa too.
Okay.
It's
from
just,
the United States?
No, from the law government.
Okay.
The visa to law territory, and but somehow, after he got into the law's territory, we sent 2 of ChinaAid co-workers there and to be his travel companions. And then just on Friday, he was arrested in front of one American citizen, one Canadian citizen.
That work with ChinaAid.
Yes, they were working with ChinaAid. So he, and then this morning, he was basically facing imminent repatriation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Repatriation meaning to the listeners, basically China making him. Wait till you get done with that. Do you need a bottle of water or something?
Maybe. Fine.
So you have this attorney being turned back from boarding a plane, and then China's going to take him back, and he's going to be under arrest.
Oh, he's not only arrested, he's definitely will face imprisonment and torture under this circumstance.
Yeah.
And so now we're trying to mobilize the international community, the State Department, the UN, other free world countries to back him up.
So when you talk about mobilizing, we didn't even start talking yet about ChinaAid and what ChinaAid is. They can go back on another old podcast of mine and listen to us talk about how you founded it. But ChinaAid basically came about because of your experience. You were teaching in Communist University in China. You were part of the Tiananmen Square. What year was Tiananmen Square?
1989.
It seemed like that's so long ago. That's incredible.
34 years ago. Yeah.
And you had become a believer in Jesus Christ. It changed your life, your outlook.
After the massacre. Yeah.
You and Heidi, your wife, were able to escape, basically. I believe she was pregnant at the time.
Yes.
And through a series of events, you end up in Midland, Texas.
Yes,
but and you have this organization. And the reason I'm saying all this is because I want to get into really where we are currently globally and what you're seeing happen. And so you start this organization called China Aid to assist people, whether they're Christians, whether they're Uyghurs, whether they're artists, whoever it is, to help them with, for lack of a better term, and you correct me, freedom of expression. What we would call the First Amendment, what we would take for granted. Is that fair?
Yeah, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, of course, the freedom of association.
Yeah,
the First Amendment rights in this country, we call it.
So I think it's so very hard for people to get their minds around how tightly controlled this multi-billion population place called China is. Can you give us a sense of just what kind of surveillance state they are?
Yeah, essentially the CCP has successfully made China as the digital kind of a tyranny country.
Yeah.
I mean, with the most extensive surveillance. Basically, now with the 1.4 billion, maybe 1.3 billion Chinese, the estimate of number of surveillance face recognition cameras has already reached to like 2.6 billion. So every Chinese would have at least 2 face recognition cameras following them from the cross of the street, of course, to all these shopping malls, to the pulpit of the church, 4 corners of the church, all have face recognition cameras. So we have the church members in the old days when they were raided.
When a church was raided in the old days.
When the church
when you say the old days,
like
how far back?
Before, maybe 10, 15 years ago, before this new dictator or emperor Xi Jinping, his nickname, since he removed the term limit of the presidency by changing the constitution, make him president for life, the second time after Chairman Mao.
Yeah.
And so he took power and basically engaging this police state status. I mean, basically in West China is an area called Xinjiang.
Xinjiang.
Yeah, where
a province.
Yeah, a province where millions of Uyghurs and Kazakhs and of course Han Chinese were there. Staying there, and believe it or not, the Pentagon estimated with 1 to 3 million Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and some Chinese, and both Muslims and Christians are being put in the modern-day concentration camps.
And
more than 500 of them.
More than 500 concentration camps. Yeah.
Yes.
For re-education.
For re-education.
Right.
Yeah. So this is a illustration, a true story. I mean, there is a University of Washington from Seattle, a Chinese student from that area. She, a few years ago, she went back to China, just tried to visit her biological father. And during that time, she was just tried to submit her homework through a VPN because China has this great firewall, preventing you from visiting from Facebook, Twitter, to any social media or Western websites.
Okay, just time out real quick. So we're going to come back to the girl from the University of Washington.
Yeah.
But when you say a firewall, I think the general public wants to believe the internet is the internet and you can go anywhere you want to go, you can say whatever you want to say. But when you say a firewall, that is basically, if I'm somewhat correct, and correct me if I'm not, it's basically they are monitoring and controlling all information no matter what.
Every online activities inside China.
Inside China.
Yeah, inside this GFW, Great Firewall, the modern day Berlin Wall, basically in a cyber sense,
right?
There are hundreds of thousands of Chinese internet police. There's a special police force called Net Police. So their only job is basically through their so-called sensitive words search or pop up and in front of the screen, if you type Bible, Jesus Christ, Dalai Lama,
democracy,
or Bob Fu, or I think maybe Patrick Payton is there, and millions of items over there. And now even the Winnie the Pooh is being censored because somehow Chinese cartoonist put a photo showing Xi Jinping is like a Winnie the Pooh.
So now that's on the list.
Totally censored. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so back to the girl from the University of Washington.
Yeah.
From Seattle. She's over there trying to submit homework.
Yes. She was 20 years old, just a junior at University of Seattle and a permanent resident of the U.S. She submitted her homework through the portal of the University of Washington's website. Of course, has to go through that VPN, kind of circumvent the firewall. And just very quickly, moments later after she submitted, she was raided in her hotel room. She was put on a black hold, and
a black hood was put over
on her head.
This is 2023.
Yes, okay. And then she was put in a police car, undisclosed, unmarked, and then sent to the concentration camp as a terrorist.
As a terrorist.
Yes.
So what has the University of Washington done, or Seattle? What are they doing?
Well, unfortunately, the University of Seattle, after being contacted by her American citizen mother in Seattle and even many friends to help their student, University of Seattle, their president, vice president office basically said, "Oh no, we can't do anything." And then when they were pressed by the State Department, because University of Seattle has a lot of their partners and contacts in China, collaboration with the Chinese government. And what they responded? They said, "No, we can't do anything because we have a multi-million-dollar project
with
the Chinese government right now." So instead of helping, the girl's mother has been receiving the tuition bills for the girl's absence from school, like overdue.
So she's still paying tuition.
Yes, she was. Up until a few years ago,
arrested.
Yeah, before she was finally released, and then she was under really under at the end of the Trump administration.
She was released.
And but was still not allowed to come back to the U.S. For over a year. And so she told me a story after she was released, pressed by the Trump White House. And she said after she was released from the concentration camp, she was put in her biological father's apartment. And the Chinese police in Xinjiang has a program basically for this so-called suspected terrorist. And they have a government official, security officer, literally slept in the living room in the same apartment.
Apartment.
In the same apartment. And every day she has to check the record, and that government official have a book, diary, basically for record her moments wherever she go. And during the nighttime and during the daytime, the government official left, but she has to go to the re-education process. They call it mind transformation. So they did that by making her to like raising the Chinese Communist Party's national flag, singing the national Communist Party's anthem, singing praises of the Communist Party. She said one day she just tried to get out of her own neighborhood for a break. Just, a young 12-year-old girl. And so as soon as she said she covered her face, even most of her face. She crossed the road. Immediately, a strong hand just grabbed her shoulder. It was a police post. A police grabbed her into the police post, said, well, we recognize you are a criminal, right?
You need to go back to your...
Yeah. Right. So her face was recognized immediately. Covered. Yeah. So that shows the extent of the surveillance. And so one guy, he was also a young man. He... Simply, when the Chinese Communist Party, started cracking down in Xinjiang, they mobilized a lot of military vehicles on the street. He took a picture and I think sent to a friend in New York, and 19 years imprisonment. 19 years. We rescued his wife and his little boy to Midland, Texas, a few years ago, and he was accused of doing espionage for overseas
because he sent a
organizations.
Picture. Yeah. What kind of surveillance are you under?
Well, both, visible and invisible. And visible, you and I, we experienced that a few years ago in late 2020.
Yeah.
My home was
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, over there, a big group of so-called protesters, and invisibly, and then the FBI, law enforcement kept telling me, those the Chinese government even hired Caucasian white Americans, and with the FBI chief told me with their names on his palms that they're hired by the Chinese government to intercept and sabotage our communication with China, because the Ministry of China Aid is, to gather very credible, true information about our brothers and sisters, the persecution, and then raising prayers and raising support and help also equip them. Yeah. And so the Chinese Communist Party basically is not happy with that.
Not happy. I know when you and I have been in Washington, D.C. a few times, I remember walking down a street one day and you leaned over and said, "We're being followed." And I remember just being in Washington, D.C. with you. It was not a very fun experience. Let's move to what happened in front of your house. When people ask me what it was like being mayor, they always say
you did the rescue.
They say things like, "Wasn't COVID terrible?" And I tell them, well, COVID wasn't the only thing we dealt with. And when I say we dealt with Chinese communist protesters in Midland, they'll look at me and say, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, sometimes as many as over 100.
And I remember getting the phone call. I believe it was a Saturday morning. It might have been a Friday morning, that there were protesters in front of your house. And I remember showing up, and here they are. At that time, it was a group of maybe 15, 16, 20 maybe, and they had their phones on stands, and they were broadcasting back to Beijing or somewhere live. Yeah. And chanting that you were a member of the Communist Party.
Yeah, and calling for elimination.
Yes. And then I remember I made a speech, and then my face showed up on these placards in front of your house that I was a member of the CCP and so on and so forth. Oh. But over time, and I'd love to just get a deeper perspective from you, we realized all these protesters were people just hired by the Chinese government.
Yes.
Getting paid every day to come do a job. They didn't know who you were. They didn't know who I was. They had their cars parked around the corner, and they'd go and talk to our police department. I guess you knew that. They'd go take a break. They'd take breaks. And they obeyed all of our laws and all of our rules.
Some
did. And if they didn't, they got fired, and they'd get replaced. What was, here we go, and this goes on for over a month, and in front of your house, even when you're not there. And what What was the purpose of that? Why in Midland, Texas? Well, it was before the 2020 election.
Yeah.
In your over time, what have you learned that was about? Do you have any idea?
Well, the main perpetrator is now already in the U.S. prison in New York City.
I saw that in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
Because I remember his name. And wasn't he running it from an apartment overlooking in New York?
The Central Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was Gao, wasn't that his name?
Gua.
Yeah. What was it all about?
Well, it's all about these CCP's extended long arm, I think, for silencing, controlling of the dissident voices. I guess that proves what we do at Midland at China Aid has some real good effect and make the CCP feel, they have to mobilize and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars because those so-called protesters live in the Odessa Marriott Hotel, pretty expensive, and it also shows, I think, how they were emboldened, I think, during the COVID. And by using all these excuses, learning from other like BLM campaign, they want to model after that, and they want to they feel they don't need to be held accountable, and the Chinese Communist Party feel we can take advantage of American freedoms for their purpose to. Launch this global elimination campaign. I mean, they were shouting, basically killing Bob Fu. I mean, essentially, and every day from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock, they showed up nonstop. And I mean, nowadays, actually, after that finished, they changed the tactics. I started receiving like. The fake hotel booking on my on behalf of my name, and then they call bomb threats from me. From
wait a minute.
Los Angeles, New York, Houston. All of a sudden, I was booked with the hotel rooms, and then these CCP agents would call the local police department for bomb threats because the hotel was booked under my name. And basically with my email, my phone number linked, and all of a sudden I received a phone call from NYPD, from LAPD detective, from Houston Hotel, Marriott Hotel, and just said, "Are you checking in? Are you setting up bombs?" I mean, that's going on in the past few months, and so that's kind of a new tactic they're doing that.
Yeah. And does our State Department help you?
Well, the State Department kind of has a task force on the CCP's. They called the cross national transnational repression. So the FBI also set up a task force handling that. So there are some arrests already made. By the DOJ. So that was, I think there are some steps are being taken. I mean, the CCP is found with at least 6 to 7 overseas police stations in the U.S. soil.
Hey, wait. The Chinese government has at least 6 or 7 police stations.
Yes.
Somewhere. Well, I knew they did in New York because that's what they busted.
Yeah.
In New York.
New York, Houston, Los Angeles, and Nevada. There's one in San Francisco.
In San Francisco.
Yeah.
Wow. So
2 in New York. Yeah.
So basically, the whole tactic behind everything that happened during that time in front of your house was just to intimidate you.
Yeah, they try to, I think, intimidate me and try to use that tactic to destroy China Aid,
right?
Destroy our voice. Yeah.
Right. What? My mind was going to a particular place earlier when you talked about people being put in these concentration camps. This is a sensitive subject, and it's pervasive, and I think there's some generational understanding, but I don't think people realize what a powerful hand China has in commerce when it comes to the phones we use, the shoes we wear, whether it's Nike, whether it's Apple, whether it's even Walmart in some regards. Yes. Talk a little bit, if you can, about China's apparent kind of lockstep hold on some of these major multinational corporations that we don't realize we contribute to.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why the CCP feel emboldened, because they can take advantage of the corporate Americans' greediness and the desire or eagerness to open China's market. In the both Clinton and Bush 43 time, even Obama's time, the prevailing kind of rationale was, more engagement with the communist China, the better kind of income, level for the middle class, and then the middle class will request for more freedom and democracy.
In China.
But they don't. So they want to change China, but instead, the CCP, China, has changed America.
Correct.
And big. And they successfully hired these politicians, from both Republican and Democrats.
Yeah,
that's right.
And
to be their lobbyists. Yeah.
Democrat and Republican.
Yes,
have been
to
guilty
be their key lobbyists. Yeah. I mean, they're basically, their children, former Secretary of States, their children, they were hired by Chinese, paid millions of dollars, basically to be their lobbyist. And, how could you kind of avoid this disaster? And now, there's a major wake up after we found the CCP would launch a spy balloon, flying, hovering, from South Carolina to Texas.
Yeah.
And now they're purchasing hundreds of thousands of acres of land, farming land next to our military base, right? Everywhere.
So you don't think any of that is made up stuff? I mean, that
spy
balloon is legit spy balloon from China.
That's right. Chinese government even admitted, and they were angry that when it was shot down, a little too late, but still shot down, and that's why they were pushing the U.S. government around and lecturing them, and that's China's internal affairs, or And now they try to, of course, not only intimidate the Chinese dissidents, but intimidate the whole world, basically. The economic subversion is even more serious. I mean, now you see that through their so-called One Belt, One Road initiative, they're building bridges, ports, and essentially economic imperialism, in Sri Lanka, in Venezuela, basically is owned by China. And they're building military base in Djibouti, Africa.
In Djibouti?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
I've been there.
The whole South China Sea, they built a military base in an artificial island, they occupied. And they're 70 miles away from Miami, right? They're building in Cuba, right?
In Cuba.
Yeah. Building a major spy listening station over there. So they feel tremendously emboldened, and I think it's time, really, it's real time to wake up. I hope it's not too late.
What does waking up look like? I mean, how does the U.S. and the world wake up to the malign influence of a dictatorship. I don't think we understand it. I don't think we can get our minds around the fact that the reason the Chinese Communist Party can do these things is they own all the resources, they own all the companies, and that's what's so interesting. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I don't care if Apple's over there or Nike's over there or Microsoft is over there. They do not operate independent from the government. Is that a
Not
true
at
statement?
all. I mean, that's very true. I mean, look, the Apple phone users in China has a total different Apple store than the rest of the world we're using. And basically, the Apple voluntarily complying with the Communist Party's demand to remove all the Bible apps, all the Bible-related apps from the Chinese Apple, hundreds of millions of Apple users, and by actually shielding these Chinese Apple users' data inside China, the Apple Center totally controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. So I got many Christians, being harassed, arrested after Apple switched to that their database handed over to China when they are trying to download, the Bibles or other apps from their Apple phones.
And to be fair, maybe not fair, but to be clear, it's not just Christians. Muslims are under oppression as well.
Yeah,
Any
what
religion.
I did. Yeah. They even.
If you tried to download the Quran, you're going to get in trouble for that.
Yeah, but some Buddhist literatures were being tolerated. So as long as the Communist Party feels they are useful to their propaganda, they would allow that to happen. So it's very arbitrary.
Wow.
So when you have the Communist Party would not honor their basic, signed commitment to keep Hong Kong, for the 50 years autonomy, and by imposing a so-called Hong Kong national security law, and now all the Hong Kong dissidents, the opposition, the Democracy Party. When you and I were there, there's still a kind of at least a healthy portion in the legislature as the opposition. And now every one of the members either exiled, arrested, or sentenced to long-term imprisonment, whether you are a known lawyer, whether you are being very well trained in the society, and many even some American citizens are being put on the wanted list for simply going to U.S. Congress to speak up for the Hong Kong cause, for their freedom. So the Hong Kong national security law prescribes their enforcement can be everywhere, anywhere outside Hong Kong. If you speak up for Hong Kong, then you are targeted according to that law. So you cannot travel to Hong Kong anymore. So if they can't keep a basic commitment on this, how could you expect them to honor the signature for a business contract?
No.
So that's the very basic question, to this. I think most of the Western business now are withdrawing, or I think they're leaving because of that. They see that. And of course, during the COVID, that's another example, right? It's so arbitrary. They can shut down the city with 20 million people just overnight without any notice. And then they can reopen it and have the COVID just flare up everywhere and penetrating overnight without any preparation or notice.
What kind of lessons do you think we all should have learned or should be learning just about the danger, constant danger even of, I guess you could call it virus warfare or germ warfare, or just the complete, again, I'll use the word malign influence of China. How does COVID play into all that from your experience, hindsight now?
Well, I mean, it seems if you caught the news last week at Fresno, California, the FBI, CDC, and the California State kind of health security raided a building, big building in Fresno, California, found massive Chinese-managed bio labs with virus.
I don't even know what you're talking
with
about.
Human
I never
samples.
Saw this.
Yeah.
In Fresno.
Yeah, Fresno.
Okay, tell this story. I have no idea.
It's crazy. It's credible. It's already, kind of reported. Now I think Congress will have to do some real investigation. Deadly serious with massive 9,000 boxes of materials from China, and with these little tubes and all with labels of different virus and bacteria and human sampling. I mean, it's already being
in Fresno, California.
Fresno, California.
I know I'm not going to be the only person listening to this.
This is not thinking, conspiracy.
What are you talking about?
It's credible information. Yeah, it's very clearly it's China managed in the U.S. soil their bio labs. Yeah, testing. What kind of things? I think they need some expert to explain. So it's not only in Wuhan. I think they're exporting this. Who knows when they have they started? The CCP started operating some labs, and I know. Well, I should be careful, but at least I know something is also happening in West Texas.
Somewhere else in the United States,
in West Texas.
Maybe West Texas.
Yes, in West Texas.
So this could be the most dangerous podcast I've ever done. So that might, of course, I've been associated with you for, you've spoken in our church. We've traveled together. We've been in Hong Kong together. We've been in Washington, D.C. together. What keeps... And when I ask this question, this is not a Biden bashing question, because you've also said Republican and Democrat presidents alike.
Yeah, John Boehner was the former speaker, Republican speaker, was hired by China's Huawei and ZTE, these Chinese spying kind of telecommunication companies, as their chief lobbyist. Yeah, public lobbyist.
Is it all just money? Does it all come down to money that they control Washington, D.C.?
It's all about money.
All about the Benjamins.
The greedy, money. I think the greedy heart, of course, we all know.
Yeah, right.
And I think the first thing we need to wake up is the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Because what is the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party?
The true nature of Chinese Communist Party is like Stalin. The party, it's like Kim Jong-un's party. It's the evil, satanic, anti all the civilization norms. They're not satisfied with controlling every mind of the people inside China. And Xi Jinping proclaimed he wants to build so-called common destiny of humanity. That's his dream. That's written in the Chinese Communist Party's, the charter right now.
A common destiny
of humanity
that doesn't include restrictions on him or people in power.
Yeah, he wants to export this control surveillance model everywhere in the world.
Do you think people, especially in America, maybe London, maybe more Western, I'd say more Western, but do you think there's a lack of appreciation for the necessary danger of democracy and freedom of speech? And people want to be so safe that they're mistaking what the Communist Party does for safety, when what it really does is restrict you. The question's not coming out very well. There is no freedom of speech in China, and they can restrict all movement. They can restrict all thought. They can restrict all conversation. And we came dangerously close to that here in America during COVID, and we're still dangerously close to that.
It is. That's very sad. That's very to me, it was a very dangerous time of basically the kind of a similar mentality, ideology was penetrating into the American's mind, and in the name of safety, in the name of big government protection, and expanding the Uncle Sam's long arms everywhere. I think that almost, you can tell it started.
Right.
That's why, the churches are being even particularly singled out, right? And to be monitored, and not only the government wants to control, when you can open your church and you can shut down your church, and how many people can you do that? And even in some countries, they want to regulate how you worship, like the content of your worship,
right?
Whether you can be allowed to sing, and what kind of psalms and hymns can you sing. So that's kind of very dangerous water.
It was a real thing that Governor Newsom in California said churches could gather, but they couldn't sing out loud. That was a dangerous thing. I remember during COVID, there was a moment early in 2020 when we just didn't know what was going on. We were afraid. All of us were afraid. We didn't know. Well, we didn't know what we know today. We didn't know how to protect ourselves. We didn't know what was going on. And I remember, early in that spring of 2020, we'd already gotten to about April or May, and there was something in my soul that just finally said, wait a minute, this is getting dangerous. We're being told we can't go here and we can't go there. We're being told, I remember listening to the hospital here actually saying, no, you can't use these ivermectin, or you can't use hydroxychloroquine, or there is no solution for this until we get a vaccine. It was just a kind of a wake-up moment for me going, wait a minute, this is getting dangerous. And I had even doctor friends of mine who wouldn't say anything in public, but we would get on the phone together, or we'd meet, and they'd say, something's different about this. Be careful. And I remember that's kind of when I made the switch to say, no, we're not going to close the city down. And churches, you do what you need to do. And the hate that people express towards myself and other members of the council because of the belief in freedom and freedom of expression and freedom of speech and freedom of choices. These are dangerous things in a world that wants to be controlled by dangerous people.
Yeah, high five and credit to you, your courage and leadership during that crisis time. When I observed the mayor of Los Angeles threatened the church, said, if you dare to worship, together, then I will order to cut off your electricity, turn off your water. That was exactly the same language in the Chinese Communist Party toward the Chinese church. They don't even change the word. I said, okay, maybe
it's no different.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe they're running out of creativity. They're playing the same playbook, and it's just in different soil.
There has to be moments when you sit back and say to yourself, you didn't think you'd ever see this in the United States.
Oh, who could have thought this would happen in the free world, so-called.
Yeah, exactly. What are you seeing in, this is like a major change of shift here, or shift change. What are you seeing happening in the church in China? Is the church growing? Is there an awakening? Is there a revival? Is it being so oppressed nothing's happening? Because it seems like the gospel usually grows under times of great oppression. Are we still seeing house church movements grow? What's happening in the church in China?
Yeah, here's another example to illustrate this. On the one hand, the persecution especially against Christians, has reached to the worst level we have not seen in 40 years since the Chernomyl's Cultural Revolution. We have seen for the first time, children were now ordered to sign the Communist Party's prepared form, to renounce their faith in public. Otherwise, they would lose their education opportunity. Their parents, even grandparents, were being threatened to lose their health care and benefit. Then you have seen the Communist Party launch the so-called Sinicization campaign, basically ordering every government-sanctioned church leaders to be re-examined by pledging their absolute loyalty to not only the Communist Party, but Xi Jinping's thought himself. And the Xi Jinping's picture with Chernomyl has to be lifted, and they're even in some areas changing the 10 commandments by removing the first commandment and became 9 commandments on the wall of the church. And already in one textbook of the college, they retranslate the Bible and with a new version of the Bible by changing, making Jesus as a murderer, as a lawbreaker, by killing that adultery woman who was brought, by the Pharisees. And so that's being taught in the classroom. And at the same time, we do have seen the churches actually are continuing to grow. I just spent some time with some key urban house church leaders in a third country. I won't disclose, but learned some very, exciting news out of this now the worst persecution in 40 years. And one of the worst persecuted churches called Early Rain Covenant Church in Chengdu City, Sichuan Province, the city of hometown of Panda. And the churches had been growing very fast. Then 2019, the pastor and over 300 of the believers were raided, arrested, and tortured. The pastor, my good friend who had been to Midland in 2006, was sentenced to 9 years imprisonment for preaching the text of John 3:16 by calling publicly for the repentance of Chinese President Xi Jinping for his persecution and offering the salvation of Jesus Christ. And that's called subversion of state power, 9 years imprisonment. His wife was tortured. Their little boy, son, was also being segregated for months. And so they even continue today without their pastor. And one elder was just released from prison. And they were gathering from their homes when they are not allowed to gather together with big groups. And in their own homes, every Sunday, Saturday to Sunday, their members are being arrested, taken away in front of the children. Sometimes the children were even beaten up. And yet, during this most heavy persecution time, I learned that the church had planted another church with new baptisms and another evangelistic kind of house was also established. So that shows
the power of the gospel.
Yeah, the power of the gospel.
And they're not, when you say
Spirit.
They started a church, they're not meeting in big buildings like we are used to seeing here in the United States. These are basically home churches, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
It's a house
Another
church
house
movement.
church. Yeah.
It's just gathering in homes and under the pretext of maybe having meals together and sharing meals together, but at the same time studying the Bible and encouraging one another.
Yeah, and knowing that they could be read at any moment.
Yes.
And they continue to do that. Yeah. So
do you think there are believers within the Communist Party who are who are modern day Daniels, just not yet?
Oh, I do. I mean, I actually personally know some, even the former, even some still like Communist Party members and some high level even leaders. They have a Christian belief and they just could not disclose them themselves. So the Holy Spirit, I think, really works tremendously this way that make the revival even possible.
Do you remember me being asked that question when we were in Hong Kong? So we were in Hong Kong together, and I was teaching, and it was a question and answer period. And one of the pastors from somewhere in China asks me that if I were a member of the Communist Party and I became a follower of Jesus, would I immediately leave the Communist Party? And do you remember my answer when I said, well, hang on a minute, because let's think about how Daniel became the change agent because of what happened in his life and being used in the Babylonian kingdom and his wisdom and so forth. And so that's why I asked that question. You know, it's important for believers to be praying for not just believers outside of the Communist Party, but who's inside, so to speak, that God may have planted there, just as he did Daniel and others, to be there at the right time when the king needs a dream interpreted, so to speak. Do you think that's possible? Do you think that could happen?
I think nothing is impossible for God.
I knew you were going to say that. That was such a softball question.
No, I think, as you mentioned, it happened to Daniel, Nicodemus, right? I mean, there are a lot of, even many prison officials, wardens in the prison, some judges, lawyers, prosecutors had come to Christ. And humorously, God's humor is through this process of persecution. And their hearts were touched, were converted, simply because they witnessed firsthand how Christians are reacting to the persecution. Instead of bitterness, hatred, or try to grab a knife to take revenge, they are still filled with love, with kindness, with forgiveness. I think that can only come from the gospel. And so their hearts were melted.
What do you see in the Church of America that is keeping it from being as effective as the oppressed church in China?
That's a good question about the American churches, right? How could we take the moment of no neutrality? You know, what's your big term? No neutral moment. God kind of sent American missionaries. Really, I regard myself as part of the spiritual fruits of American missionaries, and really through their labor, and we hundreds of thousands of millions souls were saved. And at the same time, the Americans, are facing, I think, the temptation is just a different kinds of temptation. Perhaps even the freedom, the physical freedom, here can be also a temptation. And then you kind of start the what do you call the frogs being boiled by
you put a frog in a cold pot. And
you
start turning it up. And
you kind of feel this freedom comes so easy, and easily then be taken for granted, right? And then that's why I was shocked when those young people was on the street, like calling for more government control, for socialism, communism, in a sense, even to be in place with this propaganda brainwash on them, the utopia ideal of equality, the social justice, all these big slogans, which are very good, very very legitimate ideals, but I think we're misplaced
because it's not even real social justice unless it's truly practiced in freedom. Otherwise, it's still coercion by somebody.
It's still coercion, yeah.
Do you think that Chinese believers have a more holistic view of walking with Jesus in every aspect of life because they're under constant surveillance, constant threat? When you're at work, when you're at home, wherever you are, you're a follower of Jesus. And in the American church, it's Sunday, and then you do the rest of your life Monday through Saturday. We don't have a holistic view of what it means to.
That's a good point. I think two key points is I think the Chinese, not only Chinese, I think overall those in the constant persecution, the part of the body of Christ in North Korea, in Nigeria, they have some, I think, a similar understanding. I believe it's really a more biblical understanding on freedom and on suffering. I think the first one, the freedom, does not mean only physical freedom. So if you look at our mutual friend, Pastor John Tao, who is serving 7 years imprisonment as a Chinese American, his poems are basically saying, well, the Communist Party, you think you can lock down my body physically, I would not have freedom. Actually, I have more. You cannot lock down my soul, my spirit. I can even pray. My prayer would flying like a yellow bird. Going through the prison walls and meet with the prayers of my brothers and sisters all over the world.
And just so people know, this is the interpreter who was my interpreter when I was in Hong Kong, who's now serving in
7
prison,
years,
7 years in prison for essentially saving and educating orphans.
Yes. For 2,000 children, setting up 16 schools and for sharing the gospel with them. And there's also biblical understanding on suffering. What Richard Brumbrett, the guy who spent over 14 years in the communist Romania's prison.
Voice of the Martyrs.
The founder of Voice Martyrs in the Tortured for Christ. He said, we in the West really are still lack of understanding of what he called sufferology. When Christ in the scripture basically revealed, according to Paul, we are my brothers. We're not only privileged to believe in Christ, but also to suffer for Him. And anyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be suffer and persecution. And they treat the persecution and suffering and pain for the righteous, for the gospel's sake, as a privilege, not as a burden. So the painkiller was not the best medicine, for them to seek after, and as the much of the West has been tried to live a pain-free life, suffer-free life. Our message in the pulpit is very massaging, not really, as you said, the holistic. We want to harvest the blessing of the resurrection of Jesus, but forgetting the cross, the suffering
to bear
part.
The cross,
to bear the cross.
What? How do you keep your hope alive? How do you stay positive? How do you stay in a good frame of mind after all these years?
Well, I mean, it's really the Lord's grace in that sense. It's 21 years for China Aid. It's sometimes it's hard. It's even traumatic because every day you receive some bad news, right? Some crying, a lot of suffering. But on the other hand, when you also hear those brothers and sisters, their encouraging testimony of how, despite of or in the middle of the suffering, they can still have unspeakable joy in Christ. It gave me this courage and also joy to continue. And certainly, brothers and sisters like you, with surrounding me and my family and our board, this partners also helped me keep going. So, yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you said you were answering the question, and I went back to that moment in front of your house with protesters. I don't think I ever told you the story of a member of the SWAT team sitting next to me on the curb while I was just watching these protesters. And he sits down next to me and says, Mr. Mayor, the breeze, the wind is coming from the south. So if we have to deploy tear gas, it's going to come from your right. So you need to run to your left. And I remember thinking, you've got to be kidding me. This is what this has come down to. And, but I also remember, I don't think I ever got to share this story with you either, but, I was in constant communication with the FBI and constant communication with people from Washington, D.C., and how it came down to the city council before they finally left, having to vote against this ordinance that would restrict protesting. And I remember that it was all a matter of who was going to escalate least, who was going to escalate most. And we'd been going through this. You'd been out of town for so long. Your family is suffering through this. We're all trying to figure this out. And I was sitting in a session with the council before we went out to take this historic vote about protesting, which it was modeled after a Supreme Court case, and we knew we'd get sued and all this kind of stuff. And I told members of the council, I said, we have to understand something. If we go out and approve an ordinance that restricts the First Amendment, we'll be doing exactly what they want us to do. And we'll be doing it in front of the house of a person whose life is committed to making sure people enjoy the benefits of the First Amendment. So I had to have the council take my word for it, that if we make the right choice, we have a better chance of this wrong not happening. And sure enough, we declined that, and the next day that thing shut down. But it still goes back to you had to become the victim of intimidation for us to be able to honor the value of the First Amendment and freedom. And
I so appreciate, again, for your the commitment for freedom, for leadership, and during that time, I think, yes, I mean, it's exactly the goal of those provocateurs. I mean, they try to see that happen, then they can kind of make it a laughter, right?
Yeah.
So I think we did not fall into their
trap.
Yeah, trap.
The FBI told me, they said, you need to understand the Chinese are playing a different game than you're playing. I remember that distinctly, sitting in the FBI office and them telling me, I know you think a certain way, but I promise you they're thinking way ahead of you. That was a bit scary, considering I was in Oklahoma one time during this whole thing, and at dinner, and 4 Chinese people sit down next to my family and I and start taking videos and pictures. And that's when I had to decide, do I really want to be Bob Fu's friend?
I'm glad I'm here.
What's on the horizon? What's ahead for China Aid? The same thing? Are there new things you're pushing for, pushing after? What's ahead for China Aid?
Well, for China Aid, I mean, our core mission was and still is to walk with our persecuted brothers and sisters. I mean, no matter when there's less persecution, there is more persecution, and they are part of the body, the same body of Christ.
Right.
So one part suffers, we all suffer. Yeah. So we want to continue to walk with them, by being their voice, and by in the free world, by also partner with them, and helping those who are afflicted, for their family members, for the prisoners, and we actually rescued even during the COVID time, rescued some quite a few families from the concentration camp survivors. Uyghurs, the Christian, the Kazakhs, and so they were in Texas after we rescued them. Some even end up in Stonegate, in the church.
Yeah.
So I think, we will continue and, if not, accelerate more because of this latest wave of persecution, similar level to the Cultural Revolution time. So we are expecting kind of this will be wrapping up more, so we'd better be prepared.
Who are the members of the United States Congress who are most aware and active on these issues?
In the House, the Chairman Chris Smith is a true leader, and we have some new generation of member of Congress. Congressman Pfluger, our representative, the Congressman Nathaniel Moran from Tyler, Texas area. They're all taking up, the freedom, really the baton. And in the Senate side, of course, I really appreciate Senator Ted Cruz, who is always stand up for the persecuted and speaking up very forcefully for them. And, Senator Marco Rubio is also a very good, strong
good ally,
voice.
Strong voice.
Ally.
Are there any members of the Democrat Party who, I'm not saying that in a mean way, I'm saying, are there any members from the other side of the aisle, so to speak, that understand the threat?
I think, the China threat has become a more bipartisan consensus. After all, now 83% of Americans, when surveyed, and think China is a big threat, according to the latest Pew research. And I think it's not a partisan issue. And however, the Democrat is the ruling party, and now they kind of do not want to strategically so-called rock the boat, especially China is aiming to invade Taiwan.
Yeah.
And so they want to kind of bring China into their partnership mode. At the same time, continue to warn China about the danger if they invade. So there is some soft tones, kind of strategy from the Democrat side, but I think overall, I think that the CCP threat has already become a consensus
and a bipartisan issue.
Yes.
If you had to wager, do you think an invasion of Taiwan is preeminent or is imminent?
Well, it's not my estimate anymore. You hear from the U.S. Navy commander over there. You see the Pacific Command. You see from the CIA director. They actually already declared it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So it's to them, it's almost inevitable. I think it's just when will this happen? And Xi Jinping publicly declared and basically asking the military to be ready for military action and when. He was
just to be ready.
Yeah,
we're going to do this.
He's mobilizing.
Yeah,
already mobilizing. Yeah.
What can an everyday citizen do to make a difference in this Chinese global takeover dream? What can the everyday citizen do? And I'm going to take off the table prayer. You can't use that one. I've already taken that one off the table. So what can the everyday citizen do?
I think every the citizen can do is we can raise awareness to really have more education about the CCP's threat, and to also take some very specific actions to I think from urging our legislators to take some meaningful action, like Texas Senate and House are taking action to forbid the Communist Party, Chinese government affiliates to purchase our farmland.
Right, right.
I think this is the Communist Party has major pushback, and they mobilize busloads of citizens from Houston, Dallas, and almost occupied the whole chamber of Senate. I was testifying in Texas Senate that day when they considered this bill, and unfortunately, only me and another guy was testifying for it, and all of a sudden they bust over 100 of their well-prepared propagandists to make a show Occupy, and took over the chamber's microphone.
So this was in the latest legislation?
Yeah.
But you're there to...
The current legislation.
You're there to speak to the Texas
senators,
Senate about the takeover of farmland and
That's right.
real estate.
Yeah.
And just like they did in front of your house, the Communist Party fills buses to go protest.
Yes. Inside the capital, the Texas Capitol. I mean the Texas
the rotunda.
The rotunda,
Senate, the Senate
they put
chamber.
they even on the Chinese WeChat media even teach those Chinese how to make a weapon, like with a baseball bat, and to publicly say, on their WeChat, the Chinese social media, to beat up the two witnesses, and so. They have to. The Texas state governor has to. The capital have to send two rangers, escort me. The whole process. From the time I walk in to the time escort me out. It's in the Texas capital, kind of ground.
Wow.
So I think we need to really take bold actions and urge our the federal government to start prosecuting those really the perpetrators. These are not peaceful, like simply protesters. Right. They are threatening violence in public, and with the video evidence.
Right.
And so I'm glad at least the Biden administration is taking some actions by prosecuting the organizer of the Chinese overseas police in New York. Mm-hmm. And I hope they kind of continue.
Yeah. I still will never, I just won't forget opening the Wall Street Journal and reading the names of people that we became familiar with who were orchestrating what was going on in front of your house, and realizing they finally arrested these people.
Crazy.
And it took 2.5 years to go find this. And I think even at Texas A&M, they found professors, different different enclaves that they have all over the state and all over the country. Mm-hmm. So, what can our audience do as far as praying for China Aid and what's next?
For China Aid, of course, we are just an instrument, a vehicle for the advancing freedom in China. We feel, this is a kingdom mission. This is also a mission to help secure the freedom and security for our children's children in the West. If you allow this continue to happen, the communist China will make Washington as Beijing, and the Austin as maybe another Chinese capital city if they are emboldened. So I think by equipping, by supporting, by walking with our persecuted brothers and sisters, I think even in a conventional wisdom, is the most strategic step for our security, national security, our safety, for our freedom, for the generations ahead. I think it's a win-win situation.
Yeah. And the best way for people to find you is
ChinaAid.org. You can at ChinaAid.org you can learn firsthand, credible information about persecution and the specific steps to help. From making a donation to support those the persecuted faithfuls, to join the campaign, volunteer. All things together.
And volunteering could even include, if we have college students or who are studying law.
They
could get in touch with you and
help,
how could we be involved
file
in the
legal defense cases.
Yep. Yeah, because I remember we went to the University of Oklahoma and we went to the law school years ago. And we're able to speak to some of those students. So Bob, thanks for being a friend.
Well, thank you.
And I hope a lot of people get to see what we've discussed before YouTube takes it down. We'll see how that goes.
That's right.
Before China tells them to take it down. But I joke that it's a dangerous thing to be a friend of Bob Fu, but it's an honor
thank you.
To be able to call you a friend and know that we've seen some great things happen. And I'm sure there'll be more things to come. And all my best to you and to Heidi and to the kids that are all grown up now, which is crazy.
Thank you. One of them is to be the Sooners.
Yeah, that's you raised her correctly. That's exactly right. Well, God bless you, and thanks to all that are listening. And we'll also put in the show notes when we're done through this your book. I'm sure that's still out there that people are getting your book.
God's Double Agent.
And God's Double Agent. And encourage people that it's. I can say as a former elected official. Sometimes people don't think notes and letters and phone calls matter to legislators, but they do. They do, especially if they're well thought out and they're not accusatory. They're just, please pay attention to this issue, and it matters to people. So, thanks a lot. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Patrick. Lord bless you.